I want to talk about this article about Martin Scorsese. This is an article from The Swaddle, which is not a site I have ever seen.
It's an Indian publication.
Okay.
I didn't realize at first.
I'm not. I
yeah,
can't
when you sent
say
this to me, I was like, Brett, are you sending me a parenting article?
Felt like that, right?
What do you mean?
So basically the article says why Martin Scorsese's criticism of the Marvel franchise continues to be relevant. And I think this is a very, very good encapsulation of most of the critiques I have of where film is going. And she draws it into capitalism. She draws it into...
there were certain parts of the article that I didn't like, but most of it I find agreeable.
At the very least, I found it well-reasoned.
Yeah,
most
I did
of
too.
It. So it says, this year saw a slew of, there's that word slew that you were looking at. Yes, a slew of Marvel series and films come out, more than the studio's own 2 films a year strategy. Predictably, the release of Thor Love and Thunder over the weekend was accompanied by Scorsese trending on Twitter. A reoccurring incident whenever a new Marvel release comes out. It has to do with the fact that 3 years ago, Scorsese weighed in on Marvel films as a phenomenon, opining that he doesn't consider them to be cinema in an op-ed for the New York Times. He went on to compare the movies with theme parks, suggesting that they offer entertainment value but are lacking in the depth that comes with making cinema what it is. I would say most of that is actually true. Like that general, if we were to make a general statement about it as a whole, I would say that part of it is true. His comments have since haunted Marvel fans in the studio itself. What does it mean for a great auteur director to dislike the biggest cultural behemoth in the film and television industry right now? Some have argued that Scorsese represents the old guard of filmmaking from a time that lacked diversity and told stories about the mafia, crime lords, and masculine violence that equally were spectacles unto themselves. What then is wrong with putting a cape on it?
Well, I think some of this like old guard critique, if they hadn't added the colon and been like diversity and mafia and crime lords, if they had said he's from an old guard of filmmaking that didn't have to compete, and I know she talks about streaming later in the article, but didn't have to compete with the timeline that streaming services like Netflix have turned on for basically generating tons of new content.
Yeah.
I would agree. I also think that when the film industry was not as established as it is today, I would imagine there are budget constraints, right? So
Absolutely.
He was from a day and age when he had to really go to producers or studios and be like, this movie is worth making.
Yeah.
Please give me this budget, And he has probably done that in a way that I'm not saying people who haven't worked on Marvel films haven't sort of had to advocate for their craft, but it's different when they are like, oh, we know it'll make money, so here, have an enormous budget.
Marvel makes the money, not the director. Scorsese made the money for his films when they were produced. Like, if you were to ask me right now, who produced Scorsese's movies? Most people would be like, I have no freaking clue. They just know that he made them. Mm-hmm. Who made this Marvel movie? You're going to say,
I cannot tell you.
Yeah, and now Scorsese has earned his own namesake and doesn't need to pitch those things anymore. So then, like, later on, I understand why they're bringing up their critique that if you're, one of the old guard, everything that you do is given credibility, even if it doesn't deserve it.
So it says the debate has never been more relevant. We sit at the cusp of a paradigm shift in movies. Streaming platforms are one reason why, and the complete monopolization of the industry by Disney is another. These two factors have changed the model of filmmaking itself. One of Scorsese's main complaints is that we are now in an age of audience testing and playing it too safe, with no emotional danger, nothing unique or revelatory about the human experience. At the heart of the culture war, drawing the fault lines between Scorsese on one side and Marvel on the other, is the question of whether cinema and entertainment are fundamentally two different things. Marvel promises entertainment, and the box office tells us that makes for good business. But herein lies the catch. Entertainment is often driven by a profit incentive that dictates where stories can go, and indeed what stories are even told.
I think this author must listen to us, because I feel like in some ways this is exactly what Brett and I say every time he's like, so this movie is making I know sequel is not even a term for it. It's making this 5th or 6th version of this movie, or like addition to the storyline, and I'm like, I am tired of this. We need to cut it off. And then he's like, but they make money. Like, that's essentially
that's not even rebuttal. That's just like a symptom of the problem.
Yeah,
because all movie making has been profit driven, I think. Unless
it's
you're
an
like
industry.
unless you're like a student making a film. Like, it's profit driven, but because of that, there's a false dichotomy between entertainment and cinema.
And there is something to be said that a director like Scorsese, when he's deep into the process of filmmaking, isn't thinking about the profit as much as he's thinking about getting the movie made. The studio is thinking about the profit. He shouldn't
have to be the one thinking about that, though.
Yep. Do you want to hear my historical theory on this? Mm-hmm. I think because initially we started off with like plays and musicals that were performed on stage, and a lot of playwrights often have a background in like fictional writing or political writing.
Thank you.
It had a different function. And then as technology advanced and we started making movies for silent movies and then progressed onwards, our understanding of like bringing people into the theater or bringing people in changed. Yeah. And so I think that this old guard idea of like the art that you're creating should have some kind of deeper message or reflect on humanity comes from a different tradition of the entertainment industry.
And I don't even necessarily ascribe to that. I love stuff that doesn't necessarily have great, large cultural significance.
But you only say that because you hate things that try to teach you a lesson. Because the lessons are not, like, I don't know how to say this other than, like, the lessons aren't
good,
moral.
Yeah.
They're more so a one-sided lecturing than really getting on the level of the audience and speaking to them.
And she does, and she starts to, like, this is where it starts to go off the rails for me a little bit, when she says, on the other hand, many have pointed out how, unlike the films of Scorsese's generation, Marvel responds to calls for diversity, even if the jury is still out on how meaningful it is. Black Panther, for instance, was a contender for Best Picture Academy Award, and it is difficult to argue that it did not contain the elements that Scorsese outlined as being constitutive of cinema. I would argue that is wrong. Black Panther was no different than any other Marvel movie. Was it good? Yeah, it was fine. I think that Michael B. Jordan is one of the best actors of the current generation, and Chadwick Boseman certainly was. Rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman. But both of them are fantastic actors, but that doesn't make that movie any more of a roller coaster theme park ride than the rest of the Marvel movies, just because of your political leanings. And I do believe that nomination was political in nature.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Ryan Coogler, the guy who directed it, is fantastic. That is not to say that he is not excellent at his Fruitvale Station. Excellent. Like, he's not a bad director. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's more to it than just what she's pointing out here. Am I misreading that, Mary?
I had difficulty interpreting what the author was saying
it felt shoehorned
about diversity, because I thought that more so her point was that Marvel only knows how to make the same story about a different person,
which is a problem,
rather than a different story about maybe someone who looks the same as the last. Like, it's like she's saying that it's an accident that they are like switching out.
What I took it as, like, she's saying that Marvel is aware that people really advocate for representation or diverse representation in casting now, whereas in Scorsese's day and age, that wasn't really a conversation anyone was having, and if they were having it, it wasn't to the deafening level that we have it now.
In his time, that would be a distraction from
the art.
And I would argue now that, like, she is saying, like, this critique of their ability to portray diversity, I don't think actually goes with, I don't remember where she says it in here, but she's like, we're at a day and age where we need to better understand humanity and, like, each other. And, like, I actually think personally that the obsession with representation and casting makes it harder for people to explore elements of humanity, because it becomes an obsession with sort of the identity on the physical outside, as opposed to, like, the emotional or psychological experience of, like, what you're going through, or like different situations. I think in some ways cinema, in the way that Scorsese is talking about, handled it more deftly than Marvel ever could.
Yes, and it will continue to be. Like I said, they're making Captain America 4 Anna Claire.
I don't even believe you.
With Sam Wilson as Captain America, when they could just make a movie about Falcon, which is the character Sam Wilson played before. Mm-hmm. But they don't want to take the time to try and sell a Falcon movie. Well, they think that the name Captain America is what sells, because they don't have any faith in Anthony Mackie or in the character of Sam Wilson, when they should. When he played Falcon in Captain America Civil War, and in Winter Soldier, right?
Yeah.
People loved him, and he's great as that character. He does not need to be new Captain America. He's fine as that character, but like you said, their pushes to do that means that they're inherently not going to take the risks because of which she draws into meaning capitalism later in the article.
Well, I would argue too that like they're saying we already invested this much in marketing and making spin-off shows and products for Captain America, so we need to continue to divert back to this thing that we've already invested in. Marvel movies and the crazy metaverses that I personally oppose are all born of basically the same thing, which is that these movies are part of a huge marketing, content creating web, and they're interdependent because they need to stay together. Whereas if you're Scorsese, Scorsese doesn't think Walmart's going to start making an action figure of all of his characters. He doesn't think there's going to be lunchboxes. He might sell some posters. He might get to speak at wherever, but you don't make those kinds of movies the way you expect people to interact with Marvel movies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but if you're going to actually make something that is like a milestone in culture that people remember for decades to come, you can't be thinking about what character can I write that is easy to make into a toy.
I totally agree.
The brand, it's branding. Like I said, one of the best examples I have for that would be behind me is the picture from the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, which is about they're literally animatronic turtles in the movie, and it is a more artistically done film than almost any of the Marvel movies, and evokes way more emotion than any of those movies do, because it was made at a time when, and at that time, toys, absolutely part of the deal. Marketing, absolutely part of the deal, but it was just a different time. They were doing it to sell the lunch boxes, the toys, the cartoons that came before and after.
Before it had the guarantee the way Marvel does now. I mean, if Marvel starts a movie, they know that it's either part of an already established 1,200 part series, or it's part of what will be the cornerstone of 6 or 7 or 8 movies and maybe a TV show and maybe this other thing. There's already this relationship or this web that Marvel is built. It doesn't need to take risks to be memorable. It doesn't need to have a conveying message because it's going to succeed on some level anyways, and that's really all they need. They just need it to make money.
Caper2X in the super chat says, don't you think you're overthinking this? Sometimes people just want to have easily digestible, non-PC popcorn entertainment. They also make money. They're not wrong, but I do think that culturally these movies have become significant on a scale that's...
I don't think we're reading too much into it at all.
Also, sorry, Caper2X, this is just the way I am. I totally get what you're saying.
I'm the same way.
I think that there's a place for them and that's why they are successful. But personally, I just stand opposed to them. I'm not interested in them, and I don't think that they have enough support. They don't need me to be well, but okay. I would rather have higher standards for art. I sympathize with Scorsese tremendously on this.
I love the Transformers movies. Those are not art. Those are just they're literally the opposite of art, and I love it, and that's fine.
Well, I guess there are artistic.
Yes.
Productions,
I'm
but
being
they're
hyperbolic.
not. But they're superficial by design, and I understand that there's a place for that. But you can't make that the dominant force in the entire industry because, Disney and Marvel, that's its own thing, but they're also leading the way for everyone else,
and everything is going that direction.
I'm glad the author addressed the argument that people are saying, well, they actually have more in common with the old guard of filmmaking than you think, because they're about mafia, crime lords, and masculine violence, but
sanitized masculine violence that has no stakes.
Right, exactly. And I understand this is a callback to Goodfellas, but Goodfellas is a story about more than just the mafia, crime lords, and masculine violence.
Thank you.
I think that was the whole point of the article.
I do want to read these 2 paragraphs here because these were the ones that really got me for it. So it says, still, there's something to be said for how the franchise model of creating films and TV shows occupies space. Too much, almost to leave room for anything else. Marvel features are hugely successful in the box office, and many have created an emotional impact among a wide range of audiences. But in the bid to stay at the zenith of the cultural moment, the studio churns out more while offering less. The TV shows right now, Miss Marvel, from what I understand, all filler, like almost entirely all filler. Thorius Unlimited does some really good reviews of that show that talks about just how little is actually there. The episodes are short, and it's just window dressing on something that's very, very basic.
The review I heard from Tim actually is that it's just trying to be a history lesson.
Thank
on
you.
partition.
Oh my
Thank
gosh,
you.
it's happening now?
It's happening now.
It is.
Thank you, guys. So it says many of the films feel factory made, as a colleague pointed out, and it has to do with the fact that the model of production does, in fact, resemble a factory. In other words, Marvel is a result of what happens when capitalism meets cinema. It is palatable, repetitive, safe, and never subversive or risky the way art is sometimes called upon to be. The thing is, though,
I'm just going to hold my coffee.
I'm never going to be able to talk through the... Thank you, guys. I'm never going to be able to talk through Hollywood is obsessed with subverting fan expectations, not subverting expectations for actually making good movies.
Well, I think they're obsessed with, like, subverting the expectation that everyone has for a story, which is, like, for instance...
the hero's journey
A hero's journey.
Is
like,
dead.
anything archetypal is now being just bulldozed. And it's at the expense of, making anything that could possibly, like, be entertaining and, I'll say it again, edifying for the audience.
So it says... So to me, this is one of those things where I do think that in a way, I don't know if I buy the capitalism defense here, because I do think like a Rian Johnson making Star Wars, and I know that's not Marvel, but it is Disney, making a Star Wars movie that they knew audiences would hate. That they knew that the strong core fan base would hate. But the thing is Marvel has built their fan base up to be what it is, whereas Star Wars was basically taken by Disney and then abused, right? Marvel built it up its own way, whereas Disney just bought Lucasfilm and then turned it into what it is without paying much respect to what the actual source material was. So in that respect, the subverting expectations thing, I would find, like, when we watched Reacher, I said they subverted expectations by letting a masculine character be masculine and competent at his job without having to constantly be rescued and spoken down to by women, because that is the less common thing to have happen in that genre right now. Chris Pratt is your definable action star of the age right now, right? Like, and he's just kind of like a normal looking dude. He's not a Schwarzenegger or a Stallone. He's a regular looking dude. We have Jason Momoa, who's kind of like a bro. But to me, this is one of those things where they don't want to subvert expectations in a way that actually makes the audience happy. They want to say, like, we know what you want more than you do. Take what we give you and just accept it.
I mean, I don't really like the part of the article that says this is what happens when capitalism meets cinema, because, like, look at how Lightyear did, for instance. I don't think they understand what is palatable anymore because they're so disconnected from what audiences want.
When they get it right, it's by accident.
And also, like, I think it must be said that filmmaking is an extremely young art form in the grand scheme of things, compared to, like, theater. And it has always been profit driven because Hollywood has had such, like, a hold on it, like, ever since the beginning. And, like, capitalism is not why Marvel is making crap movies.
I think one of the problems that I personally have with Marvel is, like, if you love a certain Marvel movie, if it just is your go-to, like, you're having a bad day, you want to watch a movie, you have some kind of emotional connection to it, that's totally fine. But I think that they skate by on knowing that people want to see these characters and not having to put a lot of effort into their ultimate development and plot. I think that movies that are more stripped away, movies that don't have the special effects, movies that don't have the CGI, movies that, whether they're big budget or not, but really rely on evaluating behavior and, psychological choices or conflict that really have tensions that make you ask questions about yourself, they tend to really be more memorable. You tend to relate to them more. I think these are flashes in the pan, and they just get your attention while you can, and then while they're still on the cusp of your mind, they produce another one. So you're kind of distracted and you look over here, and it's staying in their universe. But they're not asking you to be introspective in any way, because if they did, you'd have to take a position on certain issues. And I'm not even talking political issues, just like ideas of morality or right and wrong. And they can't do that because that would somehow isolate them from the audience.
We talked about how much Doctor Strange just didn't resonate with us because of how disconnected you feel because of the special effects. Literally disconnect you from the emotional stakes of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, and that is, in a literal sense, the money being poured into the movie is making it less human.
Yep.
The more people involved in a project, the less personal it can possibly be for the people that consume it.
It reminds me of like statistics about how you can become addicted to looking at your screen. They say it's like the blue light, or whether you're just like looking for the dopamine hit when you scroll through Instagram or whatever it is. You find yourself always wanting to look at the screen. And in some ways, I feel like Marvel is using that to a certain extent. Like, you want to go to the movies, but you don't really want there to be more than it is. Like, you just kind of want to
I don't want to be like visually assaulted, or like
you don't want to
have all of my senses just.
You don't want to be, but you're a very
overloaded.
Like intelligent like person who likes to engage with the material that's in front of them. Whereas I think Marvel wants to create a customer base that is like so overwhelmed sensorially, like by the light, by the characters, by the noise, by the fact that the plot doesn't really make sense. You're constantly trying to figure it out, and then there's a meteor, and then this blows up, and then there's some music, and now it's nostalgic, and now there's on a ship, like just all this stuff. And ultimately you walk out being like, whoa, I was just doing something else for 2 hours. They feel like checked out the way when you binge Netflix for 8 hours.
If you look at the audience score for Thor Love and Thunder, then that tells you all you need to know. Mm-hmm. And it's disappointing that people don't want something better.
Yep. It's funny. I was thinking about the movies we've seen since we've started this whole endeavor.
Yeah.
And I remember more from Father Stu, and I remember more from Top Gun Maverick than I do from any of the other movies that we've seen. In Top Gun Maverick, remember, there's almost no CGI. Those were actual camera shots, and that was done to supplement the emotional stakes that accompany the rest of the movie. But I remember feeling more emotionally from Father Stu.
There was so much involved in just looking at their faces. It's so much more visually interesting.
It's like they tried to do that with
evocative.
Kenobi.
And can I just say, those are both things that happen in the real world, in real places. They happen in America, like maybe not exactly where either one of you grew up, or like a lifestyle either one of you have lived, but like it's not an alien that's wandering through, or like some half being. Like, we're seeing real people, and our brains are trained to understand and look for emotion, look for ourselves in real people, not whatever the tree thing is from that one movie, who is adorable. Like, I get why people get excited about it, right? But
I just see that stuff, and all I think of is toy.
I don't think that like visual effects and meaning are mutually exclusive at all. But they've made it such an extreme that like they've pushed it to that point, and Marvel is like truly the tastemaker now.
Look at the first Independence Day, the movie Independence Day, which has literally had some of the special effects of that movie still hold up to this day. But the thing I remember more than anything in that movie was the dog being saved from the fire as it jumps into the door, which made no sense geographically because it felt like the fire should just go in the door too. And I remember President Whitmore's speech at the end to all the people, because it's the greatest presidential speech ever given in a movie. Has nothing to do with computer-generated imagery. Has nothing to do with anything with the aliens that are going on there. It's the human emotion that's evoked from what he says.
And visual effects are supposed to be something that complement the foundation of a good story.
Not
making like the meat of the whole production. Like, even if you think about Pixar movies, the reason that they animate characters the way they do and design the characters with faces that have like big eyes and just a certain face shape is so that it's easier to express the emotions on their face.
There's side-by-side images of the Lion King live action of the remake and then the original, and you realize how soulless and dead the remake is, because there's literally like, if you watch the scene where he falls off the cliff, you just laugh because it's like it's hilarious.
So obviously you can use visual effects and animation to be like the instrument in a good story, but it starts with writing a good story.
Right. And I think they're not doing that. I think they hear this is the budget and they're like, oh, I bet we could blow up 3 cars in this one.
Yeah. And I hate that like people just eat it right up.
Yeah. The line in the Swaddle article that stuck with me after I read it was, we're living in a time when we need to understand ourselves, our communities, and what it would take for humanity to survive. But I never see the humanity I live in represented in a Marvel movie. Mm-hmm. And so why would I watch it as a theoretical look for guidance? And that should tell you that like Marvel doesn't care about that. Marvel wants to put you in suspended animation. They want to distract you for a couple hours and make it so you feel like at the end of it you were checked out from the stresses of your real life. That makes you want to go back and do it again. But there's no plot there. They're not advancing your understanding of the world or your emotional state. They are actually doing the opposite of what this person thinks that they are doing,
or what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.
Bye.